everybody, my name is Caitlin and welcome back to my channel where we talk about all things horror and horror related. And today I'm going to be giving a quick review on two films that I watched on Hulu this week. That is No Exit and Fresh. Usually horror films on streaming platforms like Netflix or Hulu can be hit or miss for me, but I was actually pleasantly surprised by both of these films. I found a lot to like in both of them. They both offer pretty good scares, pretty good tension, some gore throughout. So I'm going to try to make these non-spoiler reviews. These are both definitely the type of film where the less you know going into it, the more you're going to enjoy it. But there may be a few minor spoilers here and there, so just keep that in mind. I'm going to start with No Exit, which I'll be honest was not my favorite out of the two films, but I still really enjoyed it. So No Exit follows Darby, a drug addict who is in rehab, and you find out that she's been trying to get clean for years now and nothing has worked. Her addiction has caused her to have a fallout with her family. She doesn't really talk to them that much. But one day she receives a call that her mother is in the hospital and she decides to break out of the rehab facility to go see her. She ends up stealing one of the drug counselor's cars and starts driving off to the hospital. But as she's driving, she gets stuck in a huge snowstorm. It's a blizzard that closes all the roads down. She ends up running into a police officer who basically tells her, hey, the roads are closed. You have two options. You can either turn around and go back from where you came, or you can go to this rest stop that I've opened up and there are a few people hanging out and waiting out the storm there. And so she decides to stop at the rest stop. There are a few other people there. Some of them definitely seem a bit weirder than others. And then of course things take a turn for the worst. She ends up going out to the parking lot to try to find a signal for her cell phone because she's trying to contact her family. And while out in the parking lot, she discovers that one of the other patrons in the rest stop is keeping a young girl hostage in their van. And then of course you have the classic tale of whodunit. The main character is trying to figure out who the kidnapper is and also how to save the little girl before it's too late. One thing I really liked about this film is the location. I actually really like the idea of a film taking place in a rest stop. I feel like it's new. It doesn't seem like a location that we've seen a lot in films. You definitely have scenes in movies where characters will stop at rest areas, but it's usually contained to just one scene, not a whole film. Personally, I've always found rest areas kind of creepy, especially those that are just out in the middle of nowhere with no one else around and just like, yeah, someone probably could kidnap and kill me if they wanted to and no one would know about it. So I liked the use of this location. And this is a low budget film. I believe most of the people involved are first-time filmmakers. So it makes sense that they would want to tell a story that's contained in one location. And I feel like they do a really good job with utilizing that location throughout the film. Characters being stuck inside during a weather event is not new. We have seen that before, but this is not a film where it's human against the elements. The snowstorm doesn't really play that big of a part. In fact, you have characters going in and out of the storm and they really don't seem to mind. They're not really shivering that much or seem cold. But this film is definitely about the characters and the strange web of connections that they all have to each other that you figure out throughout the film. And there's a lot of great tension throughout this film. The filmmakers do a really good job of making scenes tense. There was definitely more than one moment where I felt like I was on the edge of my seat waiting to see what was going to happen next. And I did like the twists and turns that the narrative takes. It was fun to see what the connection is between all of these characters. That being said, I do wish the pace of the film was a bit slower and they took their time developing these relationships a bit more. Everything happens very quickly in this film, and so you just get these moments of surprise, this person knows this person, but there's not enough time to let that moment breathe and let other characters react to this discovery. And there's also not a lot of time for you as the audience to kind of take that in and make the connections for yourself. For example, you have a character that will say something to another character along the lines of like, oh, there's so much you don't know about me. And then immediately the film drops on you some twist, some revelation about this character. And I feel like it might have been better had the film built up to these moments. Like if you had this character say something at the beginning, maybe in a joking way, like, oh, there's so much more about me that you don't know. And then later on in the film, there's this big revelation. And then you, as the audience, are like, oh, okay, that's what she was talking about. She actually wasn't making a joke. She was being serious. I don't know, that's probably a bad example, but just things like that. There's not a lot of build-up to these moments. They happen very quickly, and then the narrative moves on from there. So there's just not a lot of time to really take in a lot of the twists and turns. And this is probably my biggest gripe with the film, is that it moves very fast. It's definitely more of a thriller film in the classic sense than a horror film or a psychological horror film. If you're looking for a story that's gonna explore the characters' psyches, this one isn't gonna do it for you. It really is more focused on the action and moving the story along and getting in as many twists and turns as it can before the credits roll. So if you're into that kind of storytelling, and I know some people are, you'll like this film. If you're looking for a traditional thriller film, this is one to check out. And again, while thriller isn't necessarily my favorite genre, I was enjoying this film. It kept me entertained. I was intrigued to see what was gonna happen next. It started to lose me at the end a little bit, only because it got to the point where characters started making dumb decisions. One other positive of this film is that I felt for the most part the characters were fairly smart. They weren't doing anything that seemed out of character for them or outside of what the film was setting up. But by the end, it just felt like they were making dumb decisions for the sake of keeping the plot going for another 5-10 minutes. It's kind of one of those films where you know what's gonna happen at the end, you can kind of tell where it's heading, and so by the end of it, I was just waiting for it to get there. Also, one of my other gripes with this film is the character development. And as I already said, there's not a lot of character development. This isn't a film that's interested in being a psychological thriller. It really is more action-packed. I know this film is based off of a book, and I'm really curious to read the book and see how the characters are established in the novel. Because in the film, they feel a little two-dimensional at times. And one of my biggest gripes with this film is with the main character, Darby. So they set up at the beginning that she's a struggling drug addict, and so throughout the film, I was waiting to see, like, okay, how are they going to connect her drug addiction with the horror, or rather the thriller elements that are happening in this film? And they don't really do that. They establish at the beginning that she steals one of the drug counselor's cars and she finds a baggie of cocaine in the counselor's car. Right, and it's supposed to be a whole moment of like, oh, the drug counselors aren't practicing what they preach. Like, they're also struggling with addiction, kind of one of those things. And so she has this baggie of cocaine, and the filmmakers do make a point to show her pulling it out of her pocket. She looks at it, but she doesn't use the drug until the very end of the film when she finds herself in a predicament. This is a minor spoiler, but she gets into a situation where her physical strength is depleted, she's been injured, she's really struggling, and to get more energy to revive herself, she pulls out the baggie of cocaine and snorts it, and then the drug magically gives her the energy and she's able to fight back against the antagonists. And for me, that moment was just a little off-putting in terms of character development and story. Again, this is a character that they're setting up has struggled with drug addiction her entire life. It's caused her to have breakdowns in her relationships with her family. And so it just feels a bit odd to me that they would make the choice of having her use drugs as a way to gain enough strength to fight off the bad guys. I feel like it would have been more effective storytelling had she had this baggie of cocaine and was tempted to use it throughout this stressful situation, but then didn't. She was able to fight off her adversaries without needing to resort to drugs. So I don't know, that was just one moment for me that didn't quite feel right, especially with what they try to do with her character at the end of the film. I just wasn't buying it. But again, overall not a bad film. If you like thrillers, you'll probably enjoy this film. Again, there's a lot of good tension, there's a lot of good moments throughout, so I would definitely say check it out if you are a fan of this genre. So now I'll move on to Fresh, which is definitely more my type of film. This is a film that I had no idea what to expect going into it. I had seen bits and pieces of the trailer here and there. I believe this film had a premiere at Sundance, and for some reason it was one of the horror films that I missed when I was checking out all of the midnight offerings at Sundance this year. If you would like to see my review of the horror films I did check out during Sundance, I will leave a link to that. But yeah, I had no idea what to expect going into Fresh. From the trailers and some of the promotional material I saw, I got the sense that it was like, I don't know, something like 50 Shades of Grey with cannibalism. And it's not that, but it's not that far off from that either. This film follows Noah. She's struggling in the dating scene. She hasn't been able to find anyone that she connects with. And then one day she meets this guy, Steve. He's handsome, he's charming, he's funny, he sweeps her off her feet, and one weekend he invites her to go away with him, and she's completely smitten, even though there are a few red flags here and there. For example, he doesn't have any social media. There are certain parts of his life that he's very secretive about. And of course, when she goes off with him for the weekend, that's when things take a turn for the worst. He ends up kidnapping her and putting her in his basement. And that's when you realize who this character really is and what he does for a living, which is pretty disturbing, pretty dark web type stuff. And as all of this is happening, Anne's best friend Molly starts to become suspicious. They have a very close relationship, and Molly starts getting worried when she doesn't hear from Noah after a few days. And she goes on a mission to hunt the Steve guy down and find her friend. I really loved this film. As a woman, this film hit so hard. This is one of the best feminist horror films I've seen since, I want to say, Revenge, that came out in 2017. And before you dismiss this as just, oh, more woke horror, it's not. Is it a film that deals with the often real life horrors of how men treat women? Yes. But it's not one of the type of films that's more interested in shoving a message down your throat and forgetting about things like narrative and character development. And that's not to say that you can't be obvious with what your message is. I think Fresh is very clear in what it's trying to say and what it's trying to get across to you as the audience. But again, it doesn't forget to create good characters, create good story, and also have fun. For a story that at times can be very disturbing, this film has a great sense of humor. It has a lot of fun. There are very bombastic pop tunes that play throughout. You can tell Sebastian Stan is having a hell of a time playing this psychotic Patrick Bateman-like character. So it's a fun film. It's a comedic film. There are a lot of humorous moments here and there, and it definitely invites you as the viewer to come along and have fun with it, which just makes for a great time overall. And I love the female friendship aspect of this film as well. I often find that we don't get great representations of female friendships in film and TV shows, so it's always really refreshing to me when I see two female friends that get along, that genuinely have a lot of love for each other. And this is a film where you see two women fighting to survive and to save each other. And I just really liked it. I loved the little ways that they communicate with each other, and they have little codes for, you know, how they say goodbye to each other, how they greet each other. And it's these little codes that to an outsider may not seem like a big deal, but for these women, it very much is. They know how they communicate with each other, right? Every time they say goodbye, they always do an I love you more type thing. And it's those little moments that when Noah ends up getting kidnapped by Steve and Molly's texting her and being like, hey, where are you? The way that she figures out that Noah is in trouble is by texting, I love you. And then when Noah doesn't say her normal response back, like that's what triggers Molly to know that something is wrong. So I really loved the little moments like that between the characters. I genuinely felt a love between these two female friends. As far as gore goes, there's not a ton of it in this film, but I think that it actually works to the film's benefit. The little gore that they do show you within the context of what's going on with this character Steve and what he's doing is so disturbing. And they only give you little moments here and there, like little seconds, and they leave a lot up to the viewer's imagination, which I personally like. I'm not a huge fan of a lot of gore. I like when they leave it more up to the audience's interpretation, because to me, I just find that more effective. I find it more scary and more disturbing. Like, your imagination will always come up with something more grotesque than anything that they can show on screen. So I highly recommend Fresh. Again, it's disturbing, but it's also playful at the same time and kind of plays with your expectations. You're not really sure how certain characters are going to react to certain situations. If I had one gripe about it, it would probably be the ending. And again, same with No Exit. The ending, you kind of have characters starting to act a little dumb. Again, this might be minor spoilers, but you have the ending where the characters just went through a whole ordeal, and then you have one character that does the kind of classic horror trope of, hey, I have to go back and get something. And it's just like, why? Why do you need to get that? You just went through this whole thing, just leave. And I understand that they put this moment in here to set up something that happens at the end. And I really like what they set up. But again, I feel like they could have done it in a way where they didn't have to dumb the characters down, because the characters were all acting very smart up until that one particular moment, and it took me out of the film for a second. But that's really the only negative thing I have to say about Fresh. I just really enjoyed it, and it's a film that I want to go back and watch again. And I haven't felt that way about a horror film in some time, to be honest. All right, so those are my thoughts on No Exit and Fresh. Again, pretty good horror films. I was not expecting that. Not to say that I had super low expectations going into them, but they were definitely moderate expectations. I wasn't really sure what to expect, but I was pleasantly surprised by both of these films. So check them out if you haven't yet. If you have seen them, what did you think? Did you like them? Did you not? Did you like one more than the other? Let me know in the comments down below, and I will see you next time. Thank you so much for watching.